Although it is less common than homicide committed by men, female-perpetrated homicide still occurs and is worth examining in our broader discussion of female violence. So, homicide has been on the decline for both genders. However, if you look at overall trends, the gender gap that we spoke about in the previous video is actually shrinking. Okay, women are starting to kill a little bit more often. Okay, females are more likely to kill a male victim than a female victim, and men are also more likely to kill men as well. However, women are distinct from men in that women are more likely to kill people close to them, specifically their spouse. But obviously, this happens as well. And when I say more likely, I mean females are more likely to kill their spouses or children than they are to kill a stranger. And men are more likely to kill a stranger or an acquaintance than someone close to them. That is not to say the rate at which men kill someone close to them is higher or lower than the rate females do. Now, what's unique about female-perpetrated homicide is how it's portrayed by the media. Okay, when you flip on the news and there's a female murderer, it tends to be presented much differently. I'm not going to go into this in too much detail because this is part of your discussion post assignment, but I want you to try to start thinking about how and why the news may portray female murderers differently. Okay, female murderers are not just like a male murderer, but a woman. Their homicide looks quite different. In fact, female murderers are more likely to kill someone for profit or for revenge or to otherwise improve their lifestyle. So maybe they're trying to take somebody's home, or they want to leave their husband to go be with someone else. So they want to kill them to improve their life. Right? They're much less likely than men to be driven by sexual sadism, which is the sexual satisfaction that a person gets out of murder. Women are also more likely to, as I've already mentioned, to kill people that are closer to them. Okay, especially serial killers. Serial killers, they will sometimes their whole victim pool of female serial killers will be their family and friends and other close people, whereas male serial killers tend to go after people that are unknown. Okay, and lastly, this one's probably the most well-known point about female killers, but that they use quieter methods. They tend to be a bit more pragmatic with their killing, and rather than being, very loud and using a gun or stabbing and making there be blood everywhere, they'll try to use a method that makes it is a little quieter and a little easier for them to get away with. In particular, the rates of death by poison are much higher when a female serial killer is involved. But females also are more likely to drown their victims than men are. But women, this is not to say women don't use firearms or knives, because they certainly do. But the rates of poison and drowning are higher among female murderers than among males. The rare exception to this, to the typical female offender, is Eileen Wuornos. Eileen Wuornos was the focus of a movie that came out, I want to say, in 2004 called Monsters, starring Charlize Theron. It is excellent. I highly recommend. They do a really good job. They strayed just a touch from the reality, but overall it's pretty close. So Eileen, she grew up and had a particularly rough childhood. She lived with her mother was a drug addict and in and out of prison, so she lived with her grandfather. She moved with her grandparents. Her grandfather began abusing her sexually and physically. She became pregnant when she was in her early teenage years, and they sent her essentially to like a boarding school for pregnant women, and then took the baby from her. And then at some point, her grandfather started prostituting her to his friends, or like making her sleep with his friends, all while she was a minor. And eventually she ran away, but it kind of was the beginning of the making of a very isolated person that doesn't trust people, that feels like people are out to get them very much, and has a very, very tarnished outlook on the world. Okay, she's a very good example of how nurture matters, because she was a kid that was born into the world and raised in an environment that was just structured to breed violence. So she began prostituting at 11, which is a very, very young age, and that is usually an indication that she was experiencing sexual abuse before that time as well. So beginning in 1989 through 1990, she shot and killed 7 men. She was working as a prostitute, and she would go to the car and she'd go prostitute them, and afterwards she would kill them. And it started with, there was a guy that, so this is alleged, this is what Eileen said, was that he had tried to attack her, and she responded by killing him, and from there it just continued. She was the 10th woman in Florida ever to receive the death penalty. She's a very interesting case, but she's certainly the most notable female serial murderer. But she is not the only one. Far from it. Okay, women engage in all types of violence. As we already discussed, Elizabeth Bathory used to bathe in the blood of the people she would kill because she thought it would help her to keep looking young. Lizzie Borden allegedly murdered her entire family with an axe. Belle Gunness and she's not on here. Belle Gunness and Amelia Dyer would take babies, get paid to take people's babies that couldn't raise them anymore and kill them to make money. Leonardo Cianciulli killed people and turned them into soap and to cakes that she fed to her neighbors. Catherine Knight decapitated her husband and ate part of him and tried to serve part of him to her kids. These are all things that are extremely disturbing and upsetting, committed by women. And yet, we know very little about them. All these names on this list have done something worth noting, and yet they fall into the darkness. So, your assignment is to look at female serial killers and get to understand the various groups of them. Okay, based on whatever group you've been assigned to, you will work to create a wiki page, which is essentially, if you ever go to Wikipedia and you look at look something up, just mimic one of those. Okay, so you can include pictures, texts, whatever you'd like. Okay, it's open to interpretation, but this is what you need to include. The first, and this is in no order. You can structure this however you'd like. Okay, so you need to explain what this type of offender, what their motivation is, and how they typically carry it out. They also, and make sure you explain why murder was the way they saw to solve their problem, or to address whatever it was they were trying to achieve. Okay, then describe what they have in common. So what these type of offenders generally share in their past, present, and in their actions. Okay, then you're going to identify a list of women you can use the one I posted on Blackboard, or you may reference the one here. There is some overlap, but you are certainly allowed to include offenders not on either list. Okay, and then provide a list. So you could say something like a few examples include, and then make a list, and then go in depth briefly about at least 2 of them. Okay, and just tying them to each of the piece. So say, this person, Jane Doe, she was a serial killer that blah, 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 and her motivation and why she believed that was the best option, her technique, and her characteristics. So tying it back to those first points. Then discuss the societal reaction to this type of murder. And that's kind of the end. But these are just things to keep in mind, is that you need to write entirely in your own words. There should be nothing taken verbatim from anywhere else. Even if you use quotation marks, none. It's all in your own words. Okay, and then also use section dividers and headings to kind of help structure and flow. And I encourage you to include images, but if you do, just put the link of where the image came from below the image. Right? And if you have any questions on this, as always, contact me, but be sure you reach out to your group members and get going on this, okay? All right, good luck.